Why was she the only one standing still when the others moved, as if the ground beneath them was on fire? Boots scraped against the concrete. Radios hissed with clipped orders. Men in uniform bent over crates, checked weapons, laughed too loudly, as if laughter itself could silence the weight pressing down on their chests. But she stood apart, unmoving. Her shadow stretched long across the dust of the forward base, swallowed by the glare of a sun that had no mercy. She stood in the dust, but her spirit was already writing tomorrow's dawn. Her name, they whispered it differently depending on who spoke it. To some she was the sniper who made the impossible shot 3 winters ago. To others she was the pilot who landed her bird half broken, flames licking the fuselage, men alive inside because she refused to abandon them. To most she was just Lieutenant Vale, a name stripped clean of softness, a name that didn't reveal the truth. The truth was she hadn't slept in 2 nights, maybe 3. Sleep had become a negotiation she always lost. Her mind replayed a face she carried like contraband, not a fellow soldier, not a commander, a face much smaller, younger, the kind of face you tuck into memory and pretend the world won't tear it away. She didn't speak of it, couldn't, not here where silence was safer than honesty. A helicopter blade snapped the air overhead. Dust rose, stung her eyes, and for a second the sting disguised the wetness gathering there. She blinked it away. No one saw, no one ever did. The mission brief had ended an hour ago. She hadn't spoken once, not because she had nothing to add, but because the words lodged in her throat, untrustworthy. She learned something in her years of service. Silence could be mistaken for strength, and strength was a currency she could not afford to spend recklessly. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Her squad moved about with the casual arrogance of men certain the mission was routine. Secure a ridge, clear the valley, hold until relieved. Simple words on paper, but she knew better. She had studied the maps longer than the others, traced the contour lines with restless fingers deep into the night. Something about that valley didn't feel right. It wasn't just the choke points or the wind patterns that made radio useless. It was something else, an emptiness too neat, like silence waiting to ambush sound. "Lieutenant," a voice called. She turned. Sergeant Kade. His face weathered, his humor carved deep in wrinkles at the edges of his eyes. A man who had seen enough war to stop romanticizing it, yet not enough to stop believing in duty. He had children back home. 3. He showed her their photos once when the power went out and the night felt longer than usual. She remembered the way his thumb had hovered over the image of his youngest, too afraid to touch the face even in a picture. "You good?" he asked. She nodded, a lie he accepted. Soldiers accept lies more easily than civilians. Sometimes it's the only way to keep moving. "Then let's roll," he said, giving her a half-smile, the kind of smile that didn't belong out here. Engines coughed alive. Steel rattled, dust swirled again, and they loaded in silence. Her rifle sat heavy across her knees, precision incarnate. A tool that could erase a life at distances most people couldn't even imagine. She had trained for years, learned wind, trajectory, breathing, the symphony of stillness before a shot. But tonight the rifle felt heavier, as if it knew what was coming. Inside the vehicle, the world shrank. Men shoulder to shoulder, eyes darting, some joking to mask fear, others quiet because they didn't trust their voices. The metal shell amplified every cough, every nervous tap of a boot. She sat pressed against the window. Outside, the desert stretched infinite, harsh, unfeeling. The sun dropped slow, bleeding its last light across the ridges. The valley waited in shadow. And still her mind circled back, to that face, that small voice that once asked her, "Mom, when will you come home?" She had smiled then, lied then too, soon. What she hadn't said, "If I make it, if the world doesn't swallow me whole first." The vehicle jolted. Gravel clattered beneath wheels. Someone cursed. Another laughed too loud. Vale closed her eyes. She tried to slow her breathing, but every inhale felt shallow, fragile. She remembered training years back. A voice barking in her ear, "Control the breath, control the shot, control yourself." But control was slipping now, wasn't it? Because this wasn't about the valley. Not entirely. This was about the message she had received the night before. A coded transmission slipped into her hands by someone who should not have had it. A message that named the valley not as a position to secure, but a place set to become a grave. She hadn't told command. Not yet. She wasn't sure she trusted it. Was it a trap within a trap, or truth wrapped in lies? Her hands clenched. The message burned in her pocket even now, folded twice, the paper worn thin by her restless touch. The vehicle slowed. Engines hummed lower. They were close. She opened her eyes. Shadows thickened outside. The valley yawned like a wound in the earth. "Vale," Sergeant Kade said quietly, leaning closer. "You look like you're carrying more than that rifle. Want to talk?" She almost laughed. Talk. As if words could undo what waited ahead. As if speaking could soften the edges of choices she hadn't made yet. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked. The weariness around his eyes, the way he always stretched his shoulders before a fight, as if reminding his body it still belonged to him. She wanted to say something human, something kind, but what came out was clipped, professional. "Stay sharp, this doesn't feel clean." He nodded, didn't press. Maybe he knew that was all she could give. Engines died. Silence pressed heavy, broken only by boots hitting dirt. Radios crackled. Orders snapped low. The squad dispersed, shadows merging with terrain. Vale adjusted her scope, settled the rifle against her shoulder. The valley lay wide, deceptive in its quiet. Not a bird, not a breeze, only stillness that felt rehearsed. Her heart hammered, every instinct screamed, but she swallowed it down. Soldiers don't flinch at shadows. Still, the question gnawed. Had she doomed them by staying silent, or would she doom them more by speaking? Her finger brushed the folded paper again. The words inside were etched into her skull. "They know you're coming. The valley is a trap. Someone you trust is not who you think." The night crept closer. Shadows deepened. Her breath slowed against her will, muscle memory overriding fear. And then movement, small, too deliberate to be nature. She raised her scope, the crosshairs steadied, sweat stung her eyes. There, a flash, metal catching the last of the dying sun. Her throat dried, she didn't call it in. Not yet, not until she was certain. But deep inside, something shifted. This was no routine mission. The valley had teeth, and they were already stepping inside its mouth. What was it she saw in the glass of her scope? An enemy waiting, or the reflection of her own fear? The valley stretched wide, patient. Her finger rested near the trigger, the barrel steady against her cheekbone, her breathing controlled the way she'd practiced 1,000 times. And yet, her heart didn't believe the lie her body told. The valley wanted them. She could feel it. "Anything?" Sergeant Kade's whisper crackled through the radio. She hesitated. The movement had vanished. Nothing but stillness remained. If she called it in now, if she told them what she saw, would it matter? Would it change the orders? Or would it only make her look paranoid, uncertain, unfit? "Nothing confirmed," she murmured back. Silence again, heavy. The squad spread across the ridge like dark brushstrokes against the sand. 8 men, 2 women, all trained, all hardened, all carrying ghosts they rarely spoke of. Vale knew some of their ghosts by name. Others she only glimpsed in the way they looked down when laughter turned too loud. Out here, silence was often confession enough. "Lieutenant," another voice, Corporal Hensley. Young, too young, his radio tone always betrayed his nerves. "I don't like this, too quiet." He wasn't wrong, but admitting it aloud was a dangerous luxury. Fear could spread like fire. "Stay sharp," Vale said again, steady, colder than she intended. It wasn't meant for him alone, it was for herself too. The ridge beneath her boots felt brittle, like one wrong step might send it crumbling. She checked the valley again through her scope. The rocks, the shadows, nothing moved. Yet she couldn't shake the memory of that glint, that brief betrayal of light. The paper in her pocket felt heavier. Words repeating, "They know you're coming. Someone you trust is not who you think. Her stomach twisted. Which part was the truth, which part bait? The mission plan was simple on paper: sweep the ridge, clear the approach, establish overwatch. But nothing about this place was simple. And if the warning was true, if there was a traitor among them, then the danger wasn't just below. It was beside her, breathing the same air, sharing the same radio channel. She lowered the scope for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the naked darkness. The night was coming fast, curling over the horizon like ink poured into water. Bootsteps crunched behind her. Vale turned slightly, her rifle still trained forward. Private Monroe, 19, the kid from Michigan who still carried a photo of his high school sweetheart tucked inside his helmet liner. He had once asked Vale, half joking, half serious, "Do you ever get used to being scared out here?" She told him the truth. "No, you just get better at walking with it." "You really think we'll be relieved by morning?" he asked now, voice low. Not through the radio, just to her. Vale studied him for a moment. His face was trying to mimic calm, but his jaw was tight, his hands restless on his weapon. She remembered being his age, when fear felt like a betrayal instead of a companion. "If we hold the ridge," she said carefully, "then yes." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Monroe nodded, pretending the answer was enough. He stepped back into the dark, swallowed by it. Her throat tightened. She wanted to call him back, tell him something human, something more than the clipped reassurances of a lieutenant. But she didn't. The words died before they reached her lips. Movement again, this time closer. Her scope snapped to the source. A shadow shifting against stone, then gone, like smoke vanishing in air. Vale's pulse spiked. This time she didn't hesitate. "Contact 2 o'clock, 50 meters," she whispered into her radio. The squad froze, scope swung, eyes narrowed. But the valley mocked her. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. "Confirm, Lieutenant," Kade's voice low but sharp. Her mouth opened, closed. The valley stared back at her, blank, silent, cruel. "Negative, visual ghost." The words tasted bitter, as if she'd swallowed her own doubt. Radio silence followed. No one questioned her outright, but she felt it, the weight of their thoughts pressing in. She tried to steady her breath, tried to trust her training, but her mind kept circling back to that folded paper. Someone you trust is not who you think. Her eyes slid across the squad. Kade dependable, Hensley nervous, Monroe young, the others each with their own edges. Could one of them truly be? A gunshot cracked. Not hers, not theirs. The sound split the night, echoing across stone. Every soldier hit the ground, rifles sweeping, breath held, fingers tense. Vale's scope darted, searching, searching. Then she saw him. A figure darting between rocks in the valley below, too fast to track cleanly. Another flash. Another shot ricocheting off stone near Hensley's cover. Sparks. Shouts. "Contact confirmed." Vale barked into her radio, anger punching through her restraint. The squad opened fire. Tracers ripped the dark. The valley lit in jagged bursts of light and thunder. Vale steadied her rifle, exhaled slow, let instinct take over. Crosshairs caught a flicker of movement. She squeezed. The shot cracked, clean, final. The figure dropped, motionless. Silence again, but not peace. Because one shot didn't explain the stillness that followed. One enemy didn't explain the valley, waiting hunger. "Stay sharp," Kade's voice growled. That was a scout, just a scout. The word twisted in Vale's gut. Scouts never traveled alone. And then the radio hissed, static, then words faint, not from their channel. "We have them, hold positions." Vale froze. The voice was not familiar. The language was clipped, foreign, but the message clear enough. They were surrounded. She glanced at Kade. He had heard it too. His eyes met hers, hard, unblinking. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "options." The squad looked to her. All of them. Young, old, weary, hopeful, trusting her to carry weight she wasn't sure she could bear. The folded paper in her pocket burned hotter, her secret, her shame. If she told them now, if she admitted she'd known the valley was a trap, what would it cost? Their trust, their survival, both. Her mouth opened, then shut again. Because in that moment, a deeper question cut through her panic, sharp as glass. If the traitor wasn't out there in the valley, was it standing among them? She gripped her rifle tighter, the silence thickened, the squad waited. And Lieutenant Vale, standing in the dust, felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down, begging for a choice she wasn't ready to make. What do you do when the air itself feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to make the wrong move? The ridge that had felt brittle before now felt alive, vibrating beneath their boots as if the earth itself knew what was coming. The squad crouched low, rifles leveled, eyes darting through the shadows. Every rock looked like an enemy. Every silence sounded like a trap. Then it came. The valley erupted. Gunfire snapped from 3 directions at once, cutting the night open with a violent roar. Tracers streaked across the ridge, showering sparks off stone. Shouts collided with static over the radio. The air smelled of dust and hot metal, the unmistakable scent of war clawing at their throats. Vale pressed into the ground, cheek against grit, scope up. Targets flitted through her sight, shapes darting from cover to cover. Too many, far too many. Contact left, Hensley's voice cracked over the comms. He fired wildly, rounds sparking off rock. Suppressive fire, Kade barked, steady as ever. He rolled to a better position, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. Vale exhaled, the chaos around her blurring into silence for half a heartbeat. She found a target, a man leaning from behind stone, muzzle flashing, crosshairs on chest, squeeze, crack, he dropped. Another took his place, another shot, another body falling into dust. But there were always more. Her rifle bucked, her body stayed still, but inside something tore. Because this wasn't a battle, it was slaughter in slow motion. "Monroe, get down," she shouted, spotting the kid scrambling too high on the ridge. A burst of gunfire cracked above him. Stone shattered. He yelped, dropped flat, eyes wide with terror. Vale shifted, scanned. A machine gun set up across the valley, muzzle flaring like lightning. The rounds chewed into the ridge, dirt spraying, men flattening themselves lower and lower. "LT, we're pinned." Kade's voice was louder now, urgent. Vale's mind raced. Options, angles. The mission brief had promised them time, control, the advantage. But there was no advantage here, only survival shrinking by the second. The paper in her pocket screamed at her. The warning she hadn't shared. They know you're coming. The valley is a trap. Her throat closed. She almost spoke, almost confessed right then. But the words froze, stuck between pride and guilt. Instead, she pushed forward. "On my mark, shift fire to the machine gun nest. I'll take the shot." "Copy," Kade snapped back. The squad turned as one, rifles raking the nest with suppressive bursts. The machine gun paused just long enough. Vale steadied, held her breath, and fired. Her round tore through the gunner's head. He slumped, weapon silent. A ripple of relief surged through the squad, but Vale felt none of it, because for every nest silenced, 2 more guns spoke up. And then screams. "Corporal Hensley." Vale whipped her scope toward the sound. He was down, clutching his leg, blood soaking fast through the fabric. His weapon clattered beside him, useless now. Monroe crawled toward him, panic raw on his face. "I've got him, I've got him." "Stay low," Vale shouted, but the boy didn't listen. His helmet caught sparks as bullets shredded stone inches from his head. Vale wanted to move, to run to them, but her position was their overwatch. If she broke it, more would die. Her teeth ground together, rage and helplessness chewing her from the inside. She fired again, and again, her shots precise, final, but she couldn't kill enough of them fast enough. The radio spat more static, then voices again, foreign, commanding, too close now. Vale's stomach sank. They weren't just surrounded, they were being herded, pushed. Someone down there knew exactly where they were, where they'd move, how they'd respond. The message's words stabbed again. Someone you trust is not who you think. Her eyes darted to her squad. Kade, calm even under fire. Monroe, frantic but loyal. The others, faces hard but familiar. Could it be possible? Could one of them be feeding the enemy their every move? Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Then over the gunfire a voice cut through, clear, sharp, speaking English. "Lieutenant Vale." Her blood turned cold. The voice carried from the valley below, amplified somehow, echoing across stone. "Lieutenant Vale, we know who you are." Every rifle faltered for a heartbeat. Every soldier froze, listening. The voice continued. "You lead them into our hands. You carry the weight of their lives. Do they know what you hide?" Vale's heart slammed against her ribs. The paper in her pocket burned hotter than fire. Kade glanced at her, suspicion flickering in his eyes for the first time. "Do they know," the voice said again, cruel and deliberate, "that one of you is not loyal?" The ridge seemed to tilt beneath her. The squad's eyes darted, quick, uncertain. Doubt was poison, and it had just been poured into their veins. Vale forced her voice steady. "Ignore it. Psychological warfare, that's all." But her words felt brittle, empty. Because what if it wasn't just warfare? Another burst of fire rained against their cover, cutting short any thought. The squad ducked low, pressing into dirt. Vale's mind raced. She had to choose. Keep her secret and risk their trust collapsing, or reveal it now and risk everything else. Hensley screamed again, blood soaking deeper. Monroe pressed a shaky hand against the wound, eyes begging for help. Kade barked orders, keeping the line intact, but even his voice carried an edge now, sharp, doubting. Vale wiped sweat from her brow. The world blurred at the edges, sound warping, her heartbeat too loud. The enemy knew her name, they knew her squad, they knew everything. And tomorrow's dawn, the one she had dreamed of writing, suddenly felt so very far away. She raised her rifle again, forced herself back into motion. Action over hesitation, duty over fear. But inside, the question echoed louder than gunfire. How long before her silence killed them all? What breaks first in a firefight, the body or the trust holding the bodies together? The ridge shook with violence. Every second stretched long, like the earth itself was forcing them to feel every ounce of danger. Gunfire spat from the valley below, bursts of light puncturing the night. Each tracer round felt like a finger pointing, accusing, demanding blood. Vale pressed her cheek into dirt, her scope sweeping, her rifle cracking back with every shot. She dropped 1, 2, 3, but for every enemy who fell, 2 more emerged. The enemy voice had gone silent, but the damage was done. She felt it in the air, the way eyes slid toward her between volleys, suspicion buried in every glance. They wanted to trust her, needed to, but doubt was a crack and cracks grew. "Hensley's hit bad," Monroe gasped, voice breaking. His hands pressed against the corporal's wound, red soaking his gloves. "We need a vac now." "Negative," Kade barked, his tone sharp, unflinching. "Bird can't land in this fire, we move or we die here." The words cut deep. They all knew he was right. Vale swallowed hard, choices narrowed to a blade's edge. "Kade," she called, keeping her voice firm. "Suppress right flank, I'll cover. Monroe, drag Hensley low and slow, we're pulling back." Kade hesitated just for a second, enough for Vale to feel it. That pause, that question, is she leading us into safety or deeper into the trap? But he obeyed. A soldier obeys until he can't. Rifles thundered. Monroe gritted his teeth, heaving Hensley across gravel, the wounded man crying out through clenched jaws. Bullets spat dirt around them. Vale's scope found flashes, and each shot she fired carved a narrow corridor of survival. "Move," she shouted. "Don't stop." The squad shifted, leapfrogging cover to cover. Dirt sprayed, stone shattered, radios screamed with interference. Every step felt borrowed, every breath stolen. The valley was alive with death. They slid behind a jagged outcrop, chests heaving, rifles smoking. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to gasps and silence. Then the silence broke, a scream from behind. Private Jensen hit. His body tumbled down the slope, rifle clattering. Vale's gut lurched. She aimed, fired, killed the man who'd fired the shot. But the damage was done. One more down, one less voice in the dark. Jensen's scream echoed, long after it ended. The squad huddled close, eyes wide, sweat and blood painting their faces. Monroe's hands shook as he worked Hensley's bandage. Kade leaned against stone, jaw tight, scanning the dark with eyes that no longer trusted the night, or her. "We can't stay here," he said, low, controlled. "They're closing in." Vale nodded, though her throat was thick. Every word she spoke tasted like ash now. "We cut east," she said. "Ridge narrows, we can funnel them by time." Silence, no argument, no agreement. Just silence that weighed more than bullets. Then Monroe's voice, trembling. "Lieutenant, how did they know your name?" The question landed heavier than gunfire. Every eye turned to her. Even Hensley, pale and sweating, stared. Vale's chest constricted. "It's a tactic," she said quickly, firmly. "They do their homework, try to break us, don't let it work." Her words were strong, but inside she felt herself splintering. Because the truth sat folded in her pocket, burning her like a brand. They know you're coming. The valley is a trap. And now her squad's blood was staining the ground because she hadn't spoken. She pushed forward. "We move east, that's an order." Orders still worked, for now. They moved. The ridge narrowed just as she said. Stone walls rose higher, funneling the squad into a tighter path. Gunfire raked their backs, but the angles favored them here. Vale dropped two more shapes in the dark. Kade covered the rear, his fire precise, unrelenting. But the valley wasn't done. Grenades arced overhead, slamming into stone. The blasts shook the ground, ears ringing, dust choking the air. Shouts blurred into chaos. Vale staggered, ears buzzing, vision swimming. She blinked through grit. Shapes moved in the haze. Enemy or friend, she couldn't tell. "LT," Kade's hand gripped her shoulder, shoving her back into cover before another blast tore through where she'd stood. His eyes locked on hers, fury and trust warring in them. "We can't outrun this forever. What aren't you telling me?" Her breath caught. Words clawed her throat. Tell him, show him the paper, let him carry some of this weight. But before she could answer, Monroe screamed again. "They're flanking." Vale spun, rifle snapping up. Through the haze, three figures broke from the side, rifles raised. She fired quick, efficient, 1, 2, 3. They fell. Silence rushed in again, broken only by labored breaths. But Kade's eyes never left her. And in them she saw the beginning of something worse than bullets. Doubt turning to suspicion. Suspicion turning to judgment. The squad pushed forward, stumbling, dragging their wounded. Every step east felt like walking deeper into the jaws. At last they collapsed into a hollow carved by wind, temporary shelter. Bodies sagged against stone. Radios hissed with static. The night pressed heavy, unrelenting. Hensley's breathing was shallow now, each inhale a battle. Monroe's hands shook, his youth cracking under the weight of blood and loss. Jensen's absence hung like smoke no wind could clear. Kade crouched near Vale, his voice low, hard. "This isn't bad luck. They knew, they planned this, and they called your name." Vale's hand brushed her pocket, the folded paper burning through fabric. She wanted to hand it to him, to confess, to let someone else bear it. But fear coiled tight. Fear of losing authority, of shattering what little control she had left. So she lied again. "Then we outsmart them, that's what we do." Kade's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The squad settled into silence, each lost in their own ghosts. The night stretched, long and merciless. Vale sat apart, rifle across her knees, staring into darkness. Her body ached, her throat burned, her soul felt frayed. And in the quiet between gunfire, the face returned. The small face that haunted her, the voice that once asked, "Mom, when will you come home?" She closed her eyes, fighting tears she couldn't afford. She had promised a dawn, but here in this valley of shadows, dawn felt like a lie. A sound drifted through the silence. Footsteps, careful, deliberate, too close. Vale snapped her rifle up, finger tense. From the dark, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate. Hands raised, not enemy, not friend. A civilian. A woman cloaked in dust and fear, eyes wide as the moon. She spoke quickly, words tumbling, foreign and broken, but clear enough. "They know they wait inside trap." The squad froze. Vale's stomach dropped, because the civilian's words weren't revelation. They were confirmation. Confirmation of what she had already known, what she had already hidden. And in that moment, every eye turned back to her. And the silence that followed was louder than any gunfire. Why had her hand started shaking again, even though she had faced worse? It wasn't fear of bullets. It wasn't the cold wind sweeping through the half-collapsed windows. It was something quieter, sharper, the thought of what tomorrow might ask of her. The team had held the compound through the night, trading whispered stories between bursts of silence, their rifles resting in the shadows like extra sentinels. The village outside had gone still, but stillness wasn't safety. Stillness was a question, and every question had an answer waiting to unfold at dawn. She sat near the doorway, back pressed to the wall, watching the horizon. The dust hadn't cleared. It never did. But she studied it anyway, as though she could read the shapes in it like scripture, as though her brother's face might appear in its shifting haze. She remembered him again, not the strong soldier he had been, not the medal they handed her after he was gone, but his laughter when he was still a boy, chasing paper kites across dry fields. Lieutenant Tor's voice cut into the memory, soft, respectful, but heavy. "They'll move at dawn." She nodded, though part of her wanted to whisper, "Let them." Because every clash only pulled her further from the promise she had made herself, that her fight wouldn't just be about survival, but about meaning. There was a silence between them, not empty but full of things unsaid. Tor's finally broke it. "You ever wonder if they'll even know our names?" She didn't answer right away. The question deserved more than words. She turned to him, saw the faint scar that cut across his jaw, the weariness he carried in his shoulders. He wasn't asking for history books. He was asking if his mother's prayers, whispered in some kitchen miles away, would matter when the bullets stopped. "They won't remember our names," she said finally, her voice even. "But maybe they'll remember the way the ground felt safer. Maybe that's enough." He looked away, jaw tightening, as if swallowing something bitter. Yet his silence carried a kind of peace, too. When the first crack of gunfire came, it was sharp, jarring too soon. She was already moving, rifle raised, body low. Dust exploded against the floor as a round snapped through the window. The enemy wasn't waiting for dawn. They were already here. The compound came alive with movement. Shadows darted past the outer walls, their shouts broken by the staccato rhythm of gunfire. It was chaos, but not the kind she feared. Chaos could be measured, controlled, answered. It was the silence afterward that always haunted her more. "North wall," one of the men shouted. She slid into position, breath steady, finger curled. Through the fractured glass she saw them, silhouettes weaving through the debris, relentless, determined. She fired once, twice. A body crumpled, another stumbled, the dust swallowed both. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, but she ignored it. Movement at her flank pulled her eyes towards, reloading, cursing under his breath. He gave her the briefest nod, not thanks but acknowledgement. They weren't saving each other. They were saving the line. Minutes blurred into something slower, thicker. Gunfire echoed, ricocheting like angry echoes between walls. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it thinned. The shouts grew distant. The silence returned. Not peace, never peace, just a lull that tasted of smoke and copper. She exhaled, only then realizing how long she'd held her breath. Her throat burned. Her heart refused to slow, but she didn't let the others see it. Leaders weren't allowed to bleed fear. One of the younger soldiers stumbled to her side. His face was pale, eyes wide, chest heaving. He couldn't have been more than 19. His name, she forced herself to remember his name, was Collins. Are they coming back?" he asked, voice breaking like a boy's. She looked at him, and for an instant she saw her brother's face again, younger, softer, before war carved him into something else. She placed a steadying hand on Collins' shoulder. "Yes," she said, "they always come back." The boy swallowed, but her answer, grim as it was, steadied him, because if she could say it so calmly, maybe he could stand through it. Maybe. As the hours dragged, exhaustion weighed heavier than fear. Some men slept in corners, their rifles still clutched to their chests. Others cleaned weapons by the faint glow of lanterns. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Sleep was when the faces came back. Instead, she walked the perimeter, boots quiet against the cracked tiles, every shadow a question, every silence a threat. The stars above were pale, washed out by dust and smoke. Somewhere beyond them was tomorrow, but tomorrow wasn't promised. She paused by the far wall, listening. No sound but the faint whistle of wind, and yet her skin prickled. She raised her rifle, eyes narrowing into the dark. A figure shifted, barely visible. She froze, enemy, or one of theirs. Then a low whistle cut the air, a signal she recognized. Not enemy, not theirs either, something in between. Her pulse spiked. She motioned for Tors. When he arrived, she didn't speak, only pointed. He squinted, jaw tightening. "Scout," he whispered, "they're watching us." Her gut twisted. If scouts were circling, it meant the next attack wasn't hours away. It was imminent. She knew what she had to do before the others did. The compound would not hold another wave. Reinforcements weren't coming. The radios were down. If they stayed, they'd die. If they moved, they might still die, but moving carried a sliver of chance. And yet, leaving meant abandoning the ground they had fought to hold, abandoning the village that lay silent beyond. It wasn't just a tactical choice. It was a moral wound. She stood in the dust, decision heavy in her chest. Tors watched her, waiting. The boy, Collins, glanced up, eyes desperate for direction. Every soldier there carried the same unspoken question. What now? Her throat tightened, but her voice was steady. "We move at first light," she said. No one argued. They trusted her, or maybe they were too tired to fight the weight of her certainty. Either way, the choice was made. Later, when the fire died down to embers and the night pressed in close, she sat alone, rifle across her knees. Her hands had stopped shaking. Not because the fear was gone, but because resolve had taken its place. She whispered to the dust, as if her brother might hear her somewhere beyond it. "We're not running," she said softly. "We're carrying this forward. Tomorrow is still ours." And in the silence that followed, the night seemed to listen. Why did dawn feel heavier than night? Maybe because night hid the truth in shadows. But dawn showed everything. Every crack in the wall, every bruise on the skin, every fear that could no longer be tucked away. She stood in the doorway of the compound as the horizon softened to pale gray. The air was sharp, dry, and cruel. Dust still hung like a veil, refusing to lift, refusing to let them breathe clean. Her men stirred behind her, shouldering packs, tightening straps, silent in the ritual of leaving. They didn't need words now. They needed certainty. Tors came up beside her. His voice was low. "They'll have eyes everywhere." "I know," she said. Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "That's why we move fast, quiet, no noise unless there's no choice." He studied her face a moment, then nodded. He didn't ask the question she knew was in his mind. And what if choice comes too soon? Collins emerged last, his rifle hanging awkwardly from his hands. his youth still showing in the way his helmet slipped forward over his brow. He caught her eye as though searching for a lifeline, and she gave him the smallest nod. Not a smile. She couldn't afford smiles, but enough to tell him, "You're not walking into this alone." They moved out as the first streak of pale sun tore through the horizon. Their boots whispered against the dirt, weaving between broken walls and abandoned homes. The village looked like a skeleton of itself, windows shattered, doors torn from hinges, life stolen and replaced with silence. Every corner they passed felt like an accusation. "Where were you when this happened?" the ruins seemed to ask. She swallowed the guilt, locked it down. They couldn't save what was already gone. Their task was to carry forward what still could be. Her eyes scanned constantly, rooftops, alleys, the shifting curtain of dust. Every sound mattered. A stone falling, a dog barking miles away. Even the wind felt like an enemy brushing through the ruins, stirring questions in her head. Halfway through the village, Tor's hissed, "Movement." She froze, raised her fist. The column halted behind her, rifles up, breaths held. The sound came again, metal scraping lightly, almost deliberate. She crouched, peering around the edge of a crumbling wall. And there it was, a figure slipping between buildings, low and cautious. "Scout." She didn't fire, not yet. A single bullet now would turn the village into a hornet's nest. She pulled back, heart pounding, and whispered to Tors, "We cut through the south alley. Stay in shadow." The shift in route wasn't just tactical, it was survival. She led them through the narrow space where two walls leaned so close they almost touched. The light dimmed there, the air staler, but it bought them minutes. Maybe more. Minutes, that was all she ever bought them. And yet, those minutes mattered. They slipped past the scout unseen. But the reprieve was thin. Voices began to rise in the distance, sharp, angry, too close. The enemy had caught their scent. "Run," she ordered, her voice tight but calm. "Stay low, don't stop." The column broke into motion, boots thudding softly against earth. She ran at the front, lungs burning, rifle heavy against her chest. Behind her she heard Collins stumble, curse under his breath, then force himself forward again. Good. The boy was learning to fall and rise in the same breath. Gunfire cracked behind them. The first shots missed, striking stone, spraying chips into the air. The enemy was closing. They darted into a half-collapsed courtyard, diving behind walls as bullets chewed through plaster. Dust filled the air again, thick, choking. Her ears rang, heart pounding like a drum. Tors shouted something, but she couldn't hear over the gunfire. He pointed upward. Two enemies had taken the roofline. Without hesitation, she swung her rifle, breath steadying as she squeezed. One shot dropped the first. The second ducked, fired back. A round tore the wall inches from her head. She exhaled, shifted, fired again. Silence followed. The courtyard went still except for their breathing. She forced her men forward, out the far side, deeper into the labyrinth of the village. Every step was heavier now. They weren't just carrying packs and rifles. They were carrying the weight of knowing each corner could be their last. And then another sound, not enemy, not gunfire, something softer. A child's cry. It froze them in place. Colin's eyes widened. "Ma'am." "Keep moving," she cut him off, voice sharp. But the sound came again, fragile, desperate, real. Her chest tightened. She told herself it could be a trap, that the enemy used cries like that to draw soldiers out. But her legs betrayed her. They turned toward the sound on their own, carrying her through a broken doorway. Inside, the light was dim. The smell of smoke lingered. And there in the corner, half hidden beneath a collapsed beam, was a child. No older than 5. Dust streaked her cheeks, her small hands clutching a ragged doll. The girl's eyes met hers, wide, terrified, but alive. Her breath caught. For a moment the war fell away. She saw her brother again, chasing kites, laughing. She saw her mother's hands folding bread at a kitchen table. She saw everything they had already lost, and everything still worth saving. Lieutenant Tor's voice came sharp, urgent behind her. "We don't have time." She knew he was right. She knew every second here dragged death closer, but she couldn't walk away, not this time. She slung her rifle, crouched, and lifted the beam just enough to pull the girl free. The child whimpered but didn't fight. Her tiny arms clung to the soldier's neck, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Tors cursed under his breath but didn't argue. He just tightened his grip on his rifle and checked the doorway. Collins looked both terrified and awed. The boy was learning what war really meant. Not medals, not orders, but choices like this. They moved again, faster now. The girl pressed against her chest. Every step was a battle between urgency and protection. She couldn't let go, but she couldn't slow down either. Gunfire rose again behind them. Shouts echoed closer. The enemy was hunting them through the ruins. At the edge of the village, the landscape opened into barren ground, flat, exposed, merciless. No cover for miles. She froze, her stomach twisted. Out there they'd be targets, but behind them death was already coming. Tors looked at her, eyes hard. "We can't make that run." She tightened her grip on the child, looked at her men, looked at the horizon, faint light breaking through the dust. "We don't run," she said. "We move in shadows, we crawl if we have to, but we don't stop." And so they did, dropping low, moving in bursts, pausing, listening, breathing dust into their lungs until it felt like fire. The child didn't cry again. She simply held on, silent, her wide eyes staring at the rising sun as though it belonged to her. Halfway across the flat, the gunfire started again. Rounds cracked overhead, dirt kicking up around them. The men pressed lower, hearts hammering. "Keep going," she shouted, her voice breaking through fear. "Keep going." They pushed forward inch by inch. One man fell, hit in the leg, but Tors hauled him up, dragging him with sheer force. Another nearly collapsed from exhaustion, but Collins grabbed his pack, pulling him along. They were more than soldiers now. They were lifelines. By the time they reached the first rise of earth beyond the flat, their bodies were broken, lungs scorched, but they were alive. Alive and carrying more than they had before. She laid the child gently on the ground, brushing dust from her cheeks. The girl looked up at her, eyes shining with something the war hadn't stolen yet: hope. Her throat tightened. She turned away quickly, scanning the horizon for threats, but inside something shifted. This wasn't just about surviving the mission. This was about proving that even in the dust, even in the ruin, tomorrow could still be written. And she would write it, not in silence, not in fear, but in action. Because sometimes survival itself was defiant. Why did the child's silence feel louder than gunfire? She hadn't spoken once. Not when they pulled her from under the beam. Not when the bullets chased them across the barren ground. Not even now as the squad crouched in the shallow rise of earth, catching what breath they had left. Her small hands just clung to the soldier's collar, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the horizon, as if she saw something they couldn't. The men whispered in fragments, voices hoarse. Collins tried to catch his breath, sweat streaking down his dusty face. The wounded man, Hayes, grimaced as Tors bound his leg with torn fabric. No one complained. Not yet. Complaints were luxuries. Survival was work. But the girl was something else. "She's slowing us down," Tors said finally, not cruelly, just flat, as though stating the weather. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "They'll be back on us soon, and we won't outrun them carrying." She cut him off with a look, cold, sharp, final. "We don't leave her." Tors said nothing more. He didn't need to. The weight of her words settled over them all like a command written in stone. The squad moved again, weaving through shallow ridges and patches of scrub that barely broke the earth. Every step felt like a negotiation with death. She carried the child at first, then shifted her to Collins when the boy insisted. His arms shook with the weight, but he didn't falter. Maybe he wanted to prove something. Maybe he just didn't want her to. Hours bled away, measured not in time but in gulps of stale water, in the rasp of boots against grit. in the ache of muscles pushed past breaking. By midday, the sun turned brutal. Heat pressed down like an enemy of its own, sapping strength, pulling sweat from skin until their uniforms clung heavy. Hayes stumbled more than once, his wound worsening. Tors never let him fall. The dust blurred everything, sky from ground, horizon from air. It was disorienting, endless, like walking inside a faded memory. And then gunfire again, distant but too close to ignore. They dropped low, pressing into the dirt, ears straining. The shots weren't aimed at them, not yet, but they were closing. She clenched her jaw. The enemy wasn't giving up. Scouts had tracked them. The hunters were circling. They couldn't keep running blindly. They needed cover, a plan, something more than just distance. She scanned the landscape, eyes narrowing. Ahead through the haze rose the faint outline of a ravine. Its jagged edges cut the earth in a long scar deep enough to hide them. Dangerous, too. Once inside, there would be no easy way out. But it was cover. And right now, cover was salvation. She motioned forward. Ravine, move. The squad obeyed, dragging themselves toward the scar in the earth. The climb down was rough, loose stone shifting under boots. Hayes nearly slipped, cursing through clenched teeth as Tors and Collins steadied him. The girl didn't make a sound, even as rocks scraped her arms. Inside, the air cooled slightly. Shadows stretched long against the stone. They moved single file, rifles raised, every sound amplified by the narrow walls. Collins whispered, "Feels like a grave." She didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. The ravine twisted, winding deeper into silence. For a time it felt safe, too safe, but safety was always an illusion. At the bend, Tors froze, raising his fist. She slid beside him, eyes following his. There, etched into the stone, marks, fresh ones, scratches where boots had slipped, traces of movement. They weren't the first ones down here. Her chest tightened. They were walking into someone else's shadow. And then came the echo, faint, metallic, the sound of a rifle bolt being drawn. Down, she hissed. The first shots cracked through the ravine, ricocheting off stone. Sparks. Dust. Collins dropped flat, shielding the child with his body. Tors dragged Hayes against the wall. She fired back, rounds snapping through the narrow space, the thunder of gunfire deafening in the confined air. The enemy had been waiting. Ambush. Bullets screamed past, chewing into rock. The squad pressed low, trapped. Her heart hammered. Options spun through her mind, fast, brutal. They couldn't outshoot the angles. They couldn't climb out fast enough. Every second here was a countdown. She glanced at Tors. He met her eyes, and in that look was the truth. One of them would have to move, draw fire, break the line. Her throat tightened. Not Tors, not Collins, not Hayes, not the child. "Sorry." She slid her rifle strap tighter across her chest. "Cover me." Tors' jaw locked. "You won't make it." "Just cover me." Before he could argue, she bolted. Boots pounding stone, lungs burning, bullets snapping past. She sprinted toward the bend, firing bursts to force the enemy back. The world narrowed to noise and dust and the pulse in her ears. A round tore past her shoulder, hot, searing. Another grazed her thigh. She stumbled but didn't stop. Her rifle barked again, sharp, ruthless. A figure cried out, collapsing. Another ducked behind cover. She slid against the wall, chest heaving, the taste of iron in her mouth. The ambush had faltered, momentarily. Enough for her squad to push forward, dragging Hayes, shielding the girl. Tors shouted, "Go, go." They surged past her, moving deeper into the ravine. She held the line, firing until her magazine clicked empty. She slammed another in, teeth clenched, vision blurred by sweat and dust. Only when the echoes began to fade did she move again, stumbling after them, every muscle screaming. They regrouped deeper in, breaths ragged, bodies trembling. Collins' hands shook as he checked the girl, but she was untouched. Silent still, though her wide eyes glistened with unshed tears. Tors grabbed her shoulder hard. You nearly got yourself killed. She met his glare without flinching. Better me than them. His hand dropped, his anger turning to something else, something closer to grief. No one spoke for a long time. The ravine pressed around them, heavy, suffocating, but they were alive for now. As dusk fell, they found a hollow in the stone just wide enough to shelter them. They lit no fire, ate little, drank less. Silence became their language. In that silence, she sat with the child, watching her small chest rise and fall in sleep. Something inside her cracked, something she had kept locked for years. She remembered her brother again, the way his hand had once closed around hers, protective, steady, the way she had promised at his grave to carry forward what he could not. This girl, silent, fragile, clinging to life, was that promise made flesh. Collins whispered across the hollow, voice breaking, "Lieutenant, if we don't make it." She cut him off softly, "We will." But in her heart she knew survival wasn't guaranteed. Survival never was. She looked at her men, Tors, worn but unbroken. Hayes, pale but alive. Collins, young but growing in the fire. And the child, a reminder of everything worth carrying forward. She thought of the dawn waiting beyond the dust. And she made another promise, this one silent, carved inside her bones. Even if it cost her everything, tomorrow would belong to them. Why was the silence heavier than the gunfire? The night had passed in fragments, whispers, shallow breaths, the shuffle of boots against stone. No one truly slept. Fear doesn't let you. It just presses down, filling the gaps where dreams should be. By the time the sky began to pale, their bodies felt hollowed out, running on nothing but grit and will. She stood first, rifle slung across her chest, eyes locked on the faint light bleeding into the ravine. The child still clung to Collins, her small face pressed against his uniform, but even in sleep, her tiny hands had refused to let go. Tors limped closer. His jaw was set, voice low. "We can't stay another hour." She nodded. He didn't need to say why. The enemy would be on them. The ravine would become their coffin. And dawn, for all its beauty, didn't promise salvation. It promised exposure. The squad moved, slow, careful, every sound magnified in the narrow stone corridor. Hayes dragged his wounded leg, jaw clenched in agony, Tors steadying him without complaint. Collins carried the child, shoulders stiff, eyes darting at every echo. She led, scanning constantly, her senses stretched thin as wire. Every shift of dust, every scrape of stone, every whisper of wind. The ravine opened suddenly, spilling them into a stretch of barren plain. And there, far, distant, blurred by dust and heat, was the silhouette of something more than earth. A ridge, a tower, civilization. Hope. It was miles away, but it was there. A place they could reach. A place that might hold water, shelter, maybe even a radio. Collins exhaled a laugh that was half a sob. "We can make it." She didn't answer, because she saw the other thing first. Tracks in the dirt, fresh, heavy. Boots. The enemy was ahead. Her heart sank, but she didn't let it touch her face. The men needed direction, not despair. She crouched low, brushing her fingers over the prints. Her brother used to do the same, scanning soil as if the earth itself whispered secrets. "They're moving east," she murmured. "Patrol, not a full squad." Tors frowned. "If they see us out here." "They won't," she cut him off. "Not if we move through the gullies." The gullies were dangerous. Narrow veins in the earth that carved paths between the plain and the ridge. Easy to disappear in. Easier to be trapped in. But they had no choice. She motioned forward. The squad followed, every step heavy but every step closer. The gullies swallowed them whole. Cool shadows wrapped the squad as they pushed through, the stone pressing close, the silence almost unbearable. Her chest tightened with every turn. Ambush, trap, dead end. The words pulsed in her mind with each step. And then it came, the sound she dreaded. Voices ahead. She froze, raised a fist. The squad halted. Collins pressed the child closer against his chest, as if hiding her heartbeat from the stone. Voices echoed, enemy soldiers speaking in clipped tones, laughing, the sound of weapons being checked. They were close, too close. She gestured for silence, pressed her body to the wall, and inched forward, slowly, carefully. At the bend, she saw them. 5 enemy fighters crouched around a small lantern, their rifles stacked close, relaxed, complacent, but dangerous. Her mind spun through choices: attack, risk everything in a firefight, or wait, pray they moved on. She glanced back at Tors. His face was carved with exhaustion but steady. He trusted her. They all did. And trust was heavier than any rifle. She exhaled, soft and slow, then whispered so faintly only Tors heard, "We wait." Minutes dragged like hours. The enemy laughed, muttered, spat into the dirt. Finally, they rose, gathering weapons, heading east along a side path. She held still until their voices bled into distance. Only then did she signal forward. The squad moved again, slower, tighter. Breaths held until lungs screamed. When they finally emerged from the gullies, the sun was climbing, pouring light over the ridge. Civilization was closer now, so close she could almost taste it. But so was the enemy. The first shot cracked from behind them, slamming into stone inches from Collins. The squad dove, dust exploding around them. Shouts rose. Gunfire followed. The hunters had found their trail. "Move," she shouted, firing bursts to force them back. They ran, dragging Hayes, the child clinging to Collins, Tors covering the rear. Bullets snapped past, whistling death. Dust choked the air. The ridge loomed closer, but every step felt like eternity. Hayes collapsed once, his leg giving out. Tors pulled him up, cursing, refusing to let him fall. Collins stumbled but held the child tight, his young face twisted with fear and determination. She turned, fired again, dropping one of the pursuers. The others pressed forward, relentless, shadows in the dust. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't stop, she couldn't. And then the ridge, steep, jagged, rising above them like a wall. At its crest, a radio tower pierced the sky. "Salvation!" "Up," she shouted, "climb." They scrambled, boots slipping on loose rock, hands clawing at stone. Hayes groaned in pain, Tors shoving him upward, every muscle straining. Collins clutched the child, teeth gritted, dragging himself step by step. She stayed low, firing bursts to hold the enemy back. Rounds struck around her, dust spraying. One caught her shoulder, spinning her, pain ripping through her arm. She bit down hard, forced herself to keep shooting. "Go," she roared, "don't stop." Tors reached the top first, hauling Hayes with him. Collins followed, nearly dropping the child before Tors. Hands seized his pack and pulled him up. She was last, always last. The enemy was closer now, their shouts echoing up the ridge. She slung her rifle across her back, clawed at the rock, blood slicking her hands. Pain blurred her vision. But then Tors' hand, strong, gripping her wrist, pulling her up the final stretch. They collapsed at the crest, gasping, broken, alive. And there, rusted but standing, was the radio tower. Tors didn't waste time. He scrambled toward the small control box at its base, fumbling with the old equipment. Collins collapsed beside the child, clutching her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. Hayes lay back, eyes closed, lips whispering something like a prayer. She sat in the dust, her chest heaving, blood dripping down her arm. She looked at the horizon, where the enemy still moved like shadows in the distance. They were coming. They always came. But not this time. Tors' voice cracked through the silence. Signals live, reinforcements on the way. Her throat tightened. Relief was dangerous, it made you weak. But she let a breath out anyway, the first true breath in days. The child crawled from Collins' arms, small and trembling, and pressed her head against the soldier's chest. Her voice, soft and fragile, broke the silence. "Home," the first word she had spoken. Tears stung her eyes. not from the wound, not from exhaustion, from something deeper, something she had forgotten could exist here, buried under dust and fear. Hoping. She stood slowly, shoulders squared, blood soaking her sleeve, dust coating her skin. She looked at the horizon where the sun was rising fierce and unbroken. She thought of her brother, of his laughter, of his absence, of the promise she had carried for him. And she whispered, barely audible to the dawn, "We made it." The men sat in silence, listening, not celebrating, not yet, just breathing, just alive. Because sometimes victory doesn't roar, sometimes it doesn't shout or sing. Sometimes it just stands, quiet, steady in the dust. And in that dust, it begins to write tomorrow.